The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue through the storm-streaked glass. Smoke curled lazily in the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood and rain. Broken plates crunched under the boots of police officers rushing in, too late to stop what had already happened. Lila stood motionless in the center of the wreckage, her apron torn, knuckles bloodied, eyes distant. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving only the shaking, the aftermath every soldier knows too well. She had saved lives tonight, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like relapse, like a ghost had dragged her back into a war she'd sworn to forget. Across the room, Ethan Vale watched her in stunned silence. A waitress, no, a warrior, had just risked her life for his. The woman who'd quietly poured his wine minutes earlier had fought like she'd been trained by ghosts. As paramedics lifted the injured, he tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Their eyes met again across the chaos, his full of gratitude and disbelief, hers heavy with guilt and exhaustion. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, not words, not even understanding, just the shared knowledge that their lives had collided for a reason neither of them yet understood. The police would have questions, the press would swarm, but the real battle, the one between who they were and who they'd just become, was only beginning. The city glowed like liquid gold beneath the storm. Through the panoramic glass walls of Le Ciel Bleu, the skyline stretched endlessly. Glimmering towers, moving headlights, and the slow sweep of rain over light. Ethan Vale sat alone at the restaurant's most secluded table, the one reserved for billionaires and ghosts. A wine glass rested untouched in front of him. He wasn't drinking, he was calculating. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside him. Silent, controlled, but always threatening to break. His assistant had begged him not to dine out tonight. Security risk, she said. Your face was on the news again. But Ethan needed air, space, the illusion of normalcy. He just announced the acquisition of another startup, a $900 million deal that would make him even richer and even more hated. Behind him, conversations fluttered like silk, laughter, the clink of cutlery, the music of privilege. But Ethan's gaze was fixed on his reflection in the glass. The eyes staring back were sharp, gray, and empty. He wondered if this was what success really felt like, silence wearing a $1,000 suit. His phone buzzed. A message from his estranged brother. You can't buy your way out of everything, Ethan. Someday, it'll catch up to you. He smirked faintly, not out of amusement, but habit. Emotion was an old language he'd forgotten how to speak. He locked the screen and signaled for the waitress. Lila Torres adjusted her black apron, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear as she carried a tray of drinks past the glittering tables. Le Ciel Bleu wasn't her dream, but it was safe, routine, predictable. That's what she needed. Every night she moved like a ghost through this world of wealth and arrogance. Her coworkers knew little about her, except that she never joined their after-shift drinks, and that she never lost her calm even when a customer snapped. They didn't know that the faint scar on her wrist wasn't from an accident, or that she could disarm a man twice her size in under 2 seconds. That part of her life was gone, buried under layers of silence. Lila had been a field medic and a tactical response officer overseas, a role that blurred compassion and violence until she couldn't tell them apart. After the mission that went wrong, a rescue that turned into a massacre, she had left it all. She had promised herself she'd never hold a weapon again, never let adrenaline become her heartbeat. but some promises are tested in ways no one expects. She reached the VIP section and stopped. Ethan Vale. She recognized him instantly. She'd seen his face on magazine covers, heard his name on the news. The man who bought and sold entire companies like they were poker chips. He didn't look like the monster the headlines painted him. He looked tired. "Good evening, sir," she said softly, placing his meal before him. "Would you like your wine poured now?" He glanced up briefly, then nodded. Their eyes met, just for a moment, and something flickered there. Not attraction, recognition. Two people pretending they were fine. Lila smiled politely and stepped back. She didn't notice the group of 5 men entering the restaurant, drenched from the rain, quiet, eyes scanning. At the bar, Lila caught her reflection in a wine glass, the slight tremor in her hand. It always happened when thunder rolled across the sky. The flash of lightning brought back fragments, the sound of explosions, men shouting, blood pooling on dust. She blinked hard, pushed the memory away. Her coworker, Nina, nudged her. "You okay, Torres? You look like you saw a ghost." Lila forced a smile. "Just tired." Nina leaned closer. "You see that guy in the corner? The billionaire? He tipped 200 last time. Make sure he likes you. Could change your rent situation." Lila laughed softly, shaking her head. "I'm not here to impress men with money." But part of her wondered if people like him ever felt guilt. She envied how easily they seemed to live above consequence. Thunder growled again, closer this time. The city lights flickered briefly, a warning of what was coming. Lila moved between tables, her senses tuned like invisible wires. Movement, noise, tension. It wasn't conscious, it was instinct. Old training doesn't die. Near the entrance, the 5 men sat down. They looked wrong. Clothes too plain for this place. No umbrellas, no smiles. Their energy didn't match the room. One of them scanned exits while pretending to read a menu. Another adjusted something under his jacket. Her pulse quickened. She froze for half a second, tray in hand. Her hairs on her arms lifted. It was the kind of intuition soldiers never forget, the moment before chaos. She tried to dismiss it. Maybe they were just nervous. Maybe she was projecting. Still, she noted their table number, 14, and made sure her manager noticed, but he was busy laughing with a VIP guest. Ethan finished his meal slowly, scrolling through an email on his tablet. Another lawsuit, another threat. Nothing new. He sighed, leaned back, and for a rare second, let the loneliness seep through the armor. He glanced around, people smiling, clinking glasses, celebrating deals or anniversaries, and then he saw her again, the waitress, moving gracefully between tables, her posture alert, her expression focused but distant. There was something oddly grounding about her presence, like watching someone who didn't belong here but still managed to bring order to chaos. For a fleeting moment, Ethan wondered what her story was. Then the lights flickered again. Lila noticed it too, the power fluctuation, the sharp metallic click from table 14. Her instincts screamed. She turned toward the entrance just as one of the men stood abruptly. Time seemed to slow. His hand went inside his jacket. Lila's heart slammed against her ribs. 5 men, coordinated, focused, moving towards Ethan Vale's table. She didn't breathe. The storm outside roared, and with a deafening crack of thunder, fate pulled the trigger. The first scream sliced through the restaurant like shattering glass.
For a fraction of a second, nobody moved. The sound was too raw, too primal to process. Then a gunshot cracked the air, sharp, echoing, final. Chairs toppled, plates crashed, people ducked beneath tables, clutching each other. The illusion of wealth and safety dissolved in an instant. Ethan Vale froze. For years, his boardrooms had been battlefields. But this was real. The shooter's eyes were locked on him. And for the first time in years, Ethan's mind went blank. No strategies, no control, only the cold understanding that he was prey. 5 men, all armed, moved with terrifying precision. One blocked the exits, another barked orders, voice muffled beneath a ski mask. "Everyone down! Nobody move!" Ethan's security detail, 2 bodyguards stationed near the door, reached for their weapons. They didn't make it. A single burst of gunfire ended the illusion of protection. Lila was already moving. The moment the first gun went off, Lila's world narrowed to clarity. Noise vanished. Adrenaline replaced fear with sharp focus. She ducked behind the bar, grabbed the metal rod used to stir champagne buckets, and slid low to the ground. She counted. 5 men, 1 at the door, 2 flanking the bar, 1 moving toward the balcony, 1 heading straight for the CEO. Her breath came slow, controlled. She hadn't felt this pulse since the desert, that terrifying, precise awareness where life and death balanced on seconds. She peeked over the counter. Ethan was still at his cable, frozen, staring at the gun pointed at him. He looked like a man whose money couldn't buy him another heartbeat. Lila's mind clicked into its old rhythm. Assess, adapt, act. "On your knees, Mr. Vale," the lead attacker ordered. His voice was rough, distorted by a mask. Ethan didn't move. His pride, his instinct for control, both warred with the animal fear in his chest. "You don't know what you're doing," he said evenly, though his voice trembled just slightly. The attacker's reply was the muzzle of a gun against his forehead. "We know exactly who you are." The words hit harder than the threat. Ethan's mind raced. Enemies, rivals, political groups. He had too many. The realization was like drowning in names. Then, before he could speak again, chaos shifted. A wine bottle crashed against the attacker's head. Lila had thrown it. From behind the bar, her aim was flawless. The bottle struck hard, shattering, dousing the man in red wine. The gun jerked sideways as he cursed and stumbled. Ethan instinctively rolled under the table, narrowly avoiding a bullet that shattered his wineglass instead. Lila moved fast, crawling low through spilled drinks and broken glass. She reached the fallen security guard, checked his pulse, faint but alive. His gun lay nearby. Her hand hovered over it. The decision clawed at her chest. She'd sworn she'd never pick one up again. Another gunshot exploded near the balcony. A woman screamed. Lila closed her eyes for half a second and reached for the gun. The next minutes were chaos choreographed by instinct. Lila moved like a shadow, sliding between overturned tables, firing 2 quick shots to distract the men near the door. Her accuracy was controlled, measured. She didn't aim to kill, only to buy seconds. Ethan crawled toward the wall, his heart slamming so hard it hurt. He caught sight of her, the waitress, the same quiet woman who'd served him minutes ago, moving with the precision of a soldier. She took cover near the bar, signaling with 2 fingers, "Stay down." He obeyed. The lead attacker recovered, shouting orders. "Find her! She's trained!" Lila cursed under her breath. They knew now. It changed the rhythm. No longer random victims. This was a hunt. She slid behind a fallen pillar, her breath ragged. Her hands trembled for the first time, not from fear, from memory. Blood on sand, the screams of a boy she couldn't save. She shut it out. Focus. Now. Ethan crawled closer to her, pressing himself against the wall beside her hiding spot. You know what you're doing," he whispered, trying to sound calm but shaking. Lila didn't look at him. Stay quiet. Do you see that window behind you? He nodded. When I move, you go. Don't look back. He frowned, incredulous. You'll get yourself killed. She met his eyes then, sharp, unflinching. Not if you move when I tell you. The old part of her, the commander, slipped back in. Orders, calm under fire, the certainty that people's lives depended on her voice. Ethan hesitated, torn between pride and survival. Finally, he nodded. Lila counted under her breath. 3, 2. She rose from cover in one swift motion, fired twice, and sprinted toward the nearest column. The gunman turned, unleashing bullets. The noise was deafening. Ethan bolted toward the window, ducking as glass shattered above him. He stumbled, cut himself, but reached the corner. Lila dove behind a table, rolling to avoid fire. The lead attacker growled in frustration. She's ex-military, spread out. So they do know, Lila thought bitterly. That meant this wasn't random. This was targeted, and she was now part of it. She fired again, grazing one man's arm. He dropped his gun. She kicked it away, spun behind him, and in one brutal motion knocked him unconscious with the butt of her weapon. For a moment, the restaurant was a hell of smoke, fire alarms, and chaos, but she controlled her breathing, her focus. Then she heard the scream. Ethan. He'd been grabbed near the broken window, a gun pressed to his temple. "Drop it!" shouted the attacker, holding Ethan. "You move, he dies!" Lila froze mid-step. The gun in her hand trembled. The leader smirked behind his mask. "Smart girl. You think you're saving lives? You just made yourself the reason people die tonight." Ethan's eyes locked with hers, wide, terrified, but somehow trusting. He didn't beg, he didn't plead, just a small nod, as if to say, whatever happens, it's okay. Lila's mind clicked into its old rhythm. The distance was too far for a clean shot, but the chandelier above the attacker, old, heavy crystal, hung by a single central bolt. She shifted her aim slightly upward. The man laughed, pressing the gun harder to Ethan's skull. "You think you're—" Bang! The chandelier fell. The explosion of glass and metal roared through the room. The attacker screamed, losing balance, the gun slipping from his grasp. Ethan ducked and tackled him instinctively. Lila sprinted forward, disarming the man before he could reach again. The room went still except for the rain pounding against the shattered windows. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was silence. The surviving attackers fled toward the stairwell, dragging one of their wounded with them. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. Ethan slumped against a wall, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. He stared at Lila, the woman who'd just risked everything to save him, as if seeing the world for the first time. She stood amid the wreckage, gun still in hand, shoulders trembling. When her gaze met his, it wasn't triumph in her eyes. It was pain. The old guilt flooded back. She'd broken her promise, used violence again. Even if it saved lives, it reopened the wound she'd tried so hard to bury. Ethan tried to speak. How did you—" She shook her head. "Don't, not now." Outside, the storm raged harder. Inside, both of them stood at the center of something irreversible, a night that had stripped them bare. By midnight, Le Ciel Bleu was no longer a restaurant. It was a crime scene. Police tape stretched across the shattered entrance. Officers murmured into radios, and photographers captured every bloodstain, every overturned chair. The rain outside had slowed to a cold drizzle, but the night still hummed with unease. Lila sat on the edge of an ambulance, a gray blanket draped over her shoulders. Her hands were clean now, but she could still feel the ghost of gunpowder on her skin. Every flash of a camera made her flinch. A detective approached, notepad in hand. "Miss Torres, you were inside during the attack?" "Yes." Her voice was flat. "Witnesses say you—" He hesitated, scanning his notes. Engaged the suspects. Used a firearm? She stared at him blankly. I did what I had to. He studied her. Where'd you learn to handle a gun like that? A pause. The question hung in the air like smoke. Leela looked away. It doesn't matter. The detective frowned, but didn't push further. We'll need a full statement tomorrow. Don't leave the city. As he walked away, she exhaled shakily, eyes fixed on the puddles reflecting the neon lights. Her pulse was steady now, but inside, she was unraveling. Every instinct screamed, run, disappear, start over again. She'd spent years building a quiet life, and in one night, it was gone. A few feet away, Ethan Vale stood wrapped in a police-issued coat, ignoring the swarm of reporters outside the tape line. His assistant, Mara, had arrived, pale and frantic. Ethan, we need to get you to the hospital. You could have been... I'm fine, he interrupted, voice low. Get the car. Fine, she whispered sharply. 2 people are dead, Ethan. They were trying to kill you. He didn't respond. He kept glancing toward the ambulance where Leela sat, motionless. She looked smaller now, fragile, like a soldier stripped of armor. Mara followed his gaze. The waitress, the one who saved you. He nodded faintly. Then at least thank her before you disappear behind your walls again. You owe her that. Her words stung because they were true. Ethan approached slowly. He wasn't used to approaching anyone. Normally, people came to him, investors, employees, admirers. But now, in front of this woman, he felt like a man stripped of status. Hey, he said quietly, you okay? She didn't look up. You should get to your car, Mr. Vale. You're safe now. He hesitated. You saved my life. I did what anyone would do. He gave a small, humorless laugh. No, anyone else would have hidden under a table. Her eyes lifted to meet his, tired, guarded, unreadable. Maybe you just don't know many people willing to stand up for others. He opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, an officer called out his name. He looked at her one last time, a silent thank you, before turning away. As he walked off, Leela's jaw clenched. She didn't want his gratitude. She wanted distance, because gratitude led to questions, and questions led to the past she could never afford to relive. The next morning, the city buzzed with headlines. Attack on tech titan. Mysterious waitress saves billionaire CEO. Who is the woman behind the gun? Leela's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Journalists, bloggers, strangers, all wanting the same thing, her story. She ignored them all. When she arrived at the restaurant's temporary office to sign papers, her manager looked at her with sympathy. You're a hero, Leela. She winced. Don't call me that. He frowned. The owner wants to give you a bonus. The media's offering interviews. This could change your life. I don't want my life changed, she snapped. Then softer, I just want my job back. But deep down, she knew she couldn't stay. The moment she fired that gun, her quiet existence shattered. Cameras would find her. The past might catch up. She'd promised her therapist, her conscience, and the ghosts of those she'd lost, she'd never go back to that world, the world of violence and control. Yet the world was coming for her anyway. At Vale Industries, the atmosphere was tense. His security team had doubled protocols. Investors were panicking, and the board demanded answers. Ethan stood by his office window, watching rain streak down the glass. The same skyline he'd once conquered now felt distant, almost mocking. His head of security, Jackson, entered with a folder. Sir, about the attack. It wasn't random. We traced payment transfers to an offshore account linked to Redline Energy. Ethan stiffened. Redline was the rival company he'd crushed in a hostile takeover 2 years ago. The CEO had gone bankrupt, and his family destroyed. So this was a retaliation, he murmured. Yes, sir, but the part that doesn't add up, they weren't just after you. They were instructed to bring her, the waitress. Ethan turned sharply. What? Jackson nodded. Leila Torres. That's the name on record. Whoever hired them knew she'd be there. The room went silent. Ethan's pulse kicked. He remembered the precision in her movements, the haunted look afterward. She wasn't an ordinary waitress. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't an accident. Find out everything about her, he said quietly. That night, Leila sat in her tiny apartment, packing. She'd done this before. Disappear, change her name, start over somewhere quieter. But as she zipped her duffel bag, her hands hesitated. The news on TV replayed the security footage, her firing the gun, shielding diners. The anchor's voice called her the hero waitress. She turned off the TV, heart pounding. Hero. That word used to mean something. Now it felt like poison. Her phone buzzed again, unknown number. She almost ignored it, but instinct made her answer. Miss Torres? The voice was deep, calm, familiar. She exhaled slowly. Mr. Vale. I didn't mean to intrude, but I think we need to talk. She almost laughed. About what? How a waitress saved a billionaire? You already thanked me. No, about why they wanted you as much as they wanted me. The silence that followed was sharp enough to hurt. She ended the call without another word. Then she sat very still, staring at her reflection in the dark window. The fear she'd buried for years began to resurface. Not the fear of violence, but the truth. Someone out there knew who she really was, and that meant she wasn't safe anymore. Across the city, Ethan replayed the sound of the phone disconnecting. He'd heard something in her voice, not defiance, but pain. And beneath that pain, something he recognized too well. Guilt. He poured himself a drink, though he didn't touch it. For a man who'd built an empire on control, he suddenly felt helpless. He looked over at the skyline and whispered to no one, "Who are you, Leila Torres?" At the same moment, across the city, Leila whispered into the silence of her apartment, "Why couldn't you just leave me alone?" Two people, both trying to escape the same night, and both doomed to find each other again.
3 days later, Lila was already halfway to vanishing. She'd quit the restaurant, closed her bank account, and packed her life into a single duffel bag. The bus terminal was almost empty, fluorescent lights buzzing, the smell of diesel thick in the air. "Next departure, Denver," the loudspeaker crackled. Lila adjusted the strap of her bag, glancing at her phone one last time. No messages, no calls, just silence, exactly how she liked it. Until a voice behind her said, "You really are hard to find." She froze. That voice. Calm, controlled, familiar. Ethan Vale stood there, in a black coat, rain clinging to his hair. He looked out of place, too polished for a station full of people escaping their lives. "What are you doing here?" she said sharply. "I could ask you the same thing. I'm leaving. I can see that, but you shouldn't." Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to tell me what to do." He sighed. "I know, but I also know the men who attacked me weren't just after me. Someone wanted you, and if you run, they'll find you first." Her stomach twisted. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to run from something you didn't choose." That hit harder than she expected. She stared at him, unsure whether to believe him or shoot him a glare sharp enough to end the conversation. Before she could decide, a phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened. "They found your old address." Her heart dropped. "How do you know that?" "Because they broke into it an hour ago." For a split second, the world went still. Then, without another word, Ethan grabbed her wrist and said, "You're coming with me." The safe house wasn't what she expected. No glass towers or bodyguards, just a quiet cabin outside the city, surrounded by fog and pine. Lila paced by the window while Ethan made a call in the corner. "Yes, Jackson, we're off-grid. Keep the team monitoring movement near the address. If anyone matches the attacker's profile, alert me immediately." He hung up and turned toward her.
You can relax." "Relax?" She laughed bitterly. "You dragged me into the woods after stalking me to a bus station. You'd rather I left you for them? I'd rather you let me handle it myself." He crossed his arms. "You tried that before. How's that working out?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no winning with him, not when he was half right. After a long silence, Ethan asked quietly, "Who were you before all this?" Lila turned away. "Nobody. People don't fight like that unless they've been trained." Her voice was low. "Drop it." He nodded slowly, but the curiosity in his eyes didn't fade. Hours passed. Rain turned to sleet. Lila sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, while Ethan typed on his laptop, digging through data like a man possessed. Finally, she broke the silence. "You're not used to people saying no to you, are you?" He glanced up. "Excuse me?" "You have that look, the kind rich men get when the world stops bending to them." He smirked faintly. "And you have the look of someone who's been running too long to trust anyone who doesn't carry a gun." She stared at him, surprised he'd seen through her so easily. "Touché," she muttered. For a moment, something shifted between them, a reluctant understanding. Two broken people, both hiding behind their own versions of control. Then his phone buzzed again. He answered quickly, voice sharp. "Jackson?" "What?" "Say that again." Lila straightened. He hung up, face pale. "They've identified the man who paid for the attack. His name's Mateo Rivas." Her blood ran cold. She knew that name. She'd prayed never to hear it again. "Lila," Ethan said quietly, "who is he?" She closed her eyes. "He's the reason I stopped being a cop." The words came slowly, each one pulled out like a confession. 5 years ago, I worked for the Organized Crime Division. Rivas run a trafficking ring. We were building a case. He killed my partner and vanished before trial. I went into protection, changed my name, started over. I thought he was gone. Ethan listened, silent. She continued, "He must have found out where I was. And if he came after you, maybe he thought you were connected to the case somehow." Ethan frowned. "Vail Industries bought a data security firm last year. We'd just started investigating shell accounts that moved money through illegal pipelines. Maybe Rivas's operation got caught in our audit." They both realized it at the same time. They weren't targets by accident. They were collateral in the same war. "So what now?" she asked quietly. "Now," he said, closing his laptop, "we stop running." Over the next few days, the cabin became an unlikely command center. Ethan handled contacts, tracing Rivas's network through encrypted ledgers. Lila planned defense routes, weapons caches, and emergency exits. Their partnership was tense but efficient, two opposites bound by survival. At night, when exhaustion blurred the edges, conversation turned softer. "Why did you really leave the force?" he asked one evening. She stared at the fire. "Because saving people didn't save me." He said nothing, but the pain in her voice lingered with him long after she fell asleep on the couch. It was past midnight when Ethan heard her cry out from a nightmare. He rushed over, shaking her gently. "Lila, hey, wake up." She jolted upright, breathing hard. "Don't touch me." He backed off immediately, hands raised. "It's okay, you're safe." She pressed her palms to her eyes. "You shouldn't be here." I could say the same thing. That made her look at him, really look. For once the walls between them faltered. "You keep saying you don't need anyone," he said quietly, "but I think you're terrified of what happens if someone actually stays." Her voice broke. "Don't psychoanalyze me, Vail. Then stop running long enough to let me help you." The air between them grew taut. Too much unsaid, too much wanted. But before anything could cross that invisible line, his phone buzzed. He turned the screen toward her. A new message blinked on the monitor. "We found you." Her face draining of color. The cabin lights flickered. Then, outside, the crunch of tires on gravel. The first bullet shattered the kitchen window. Lila dove for the floor, dragging Ethan down with her as glass sprayed across the room. "Lights off," she hissed. The cabin went black except for the flicker of the fireplace. "Move to the back," she whispered. "Stay low." "Who are they?" he asked. "Rivas men." "How?" "Doesn't matter. They found us." She reached under the couch, pulled out a Glock, and chambered a round like muscle memory.
Her movements were fluid, precise, too natural for a former waitress. The next gunshot splintered the front door. Boots crunched on the porch. Lila's pulse slowed. Her world narrowed to instinct. She fired twice. One man fell, the other stumbled back screaming. Ethan crouched behind the counter, breath ragged. "You've done this before." She ignored him, eyes on the door. "Two more outside, window, left side. How do you—" "I can hear them. Lila, this isn't normal. Neither is surviving." He didn't argue after that. By the time the last man fled into the woods, sirens were already echoing in the distance. Local police, maybe Vale's private security team. But something in Ethan's face told her the danger wasn't over. Minutes later, as smoke still drifted from the shattered doorway, Ethan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Vale?" A distorted voice said, "You shouldn't have gotten involved, Mr. Vale. Some things are bigger than your business empire." Ethan's stomach clenched. "Who is this?" The voice chuckled. "Ask your father." Click. Ethan froze. "My father's dead," he muttered. Lila frowned. "What did they say?" "Nothing," he lied quickly. But inside his mind was spinning. His father, the late Richard Vale, had built the foundation of their company. If Revis's name was connected to him, that meant the rot ran deeper than he had imagined. While Ethan pretended to sleep that night, Lila found him still awake at 3 a.m., staring at his laptop. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "Proof." He opened a folder of old company records, payment logs, offshore accounts, encrypted transfers. These accounts matched the same shell corporations Revis used. Only difference is, they existed under my father's signature. Her eyes widened. "You're saying your family funded him?" "I'm saying maybe the attacks weren't about my investigation. Maybe they were about shutting me up before I uncovered who enabled Revis in the first place." She shook her head. "Ethan, if that's true, it means my father was complicit in human trafficking, and now his sins are trying to erase mine." The silence between them thickened. Then she said softly, "You should have told me." He looked up, guilt flickering. "And you should have told me you were a cop." That landed like a slap. "What was I supposed to say? Hi, I'm the disgraced officer whose testimony got her partner killed? You lied! I survived!" They were both standing now, voices rising over the crackling fire. "I trusted you. You let me believe you were just some waitress. I am just some waitress. Or I was until you dragged me back into this nightmare." He stared at her, hurt, betrayed, but also something else. The fear of losing the only person who had understood what he was facing. "You're running again," he said quietly, "because that's easier than letting someone see who you really are." She turned away, fighting tears. "And you're judging me because you've never had to be anyone but yourself." The words cut both ways. Neither spoke for a long time. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Lila packing her duffel bag again. "Don't," he said. "I can't stay. Revis won't stop until he buries everyone connected to his past, and that includes you. You'll be safer if I'm gone." He stepped in front of her. "You think running will save me? You're the only one who's managed to keep me alive this long." She hesitated. For a moment her resolution cracked, then she handed him a flash drive. "What's this?" "Evidence. Everything I collected on Revis before I went underground. Bank trails, witness statements, surveillance files. If you really want to end this, that's your key." "And where will you go?" "Somewhere he can't find me." "Lila!" But before he could stop her, she brushed past him, her voice breaking. "You were never supposed to be part of this." The door slammed, and for the first time in years, Ethan Vale felt helpless. That night, Ethan opened the flash drive. Inside was a folder labeled Operation Siren. As he clicked through, one file caught his eye, a video recording from a police interrogation room. The date read 2019. Lila's face appeared on the screen.
younger, uniformed, haunted. Across from her sat Mateo Rivas, handcuffed, smirking. The audio crackled. Rivas, you think you're the hero, don't you? You don't even know who your friends work for. Lila, you're done, Rivas. No, you're done. When your chief signs this deal, he signs you. Ethan froze. As a second figure entered the frame, Richard Vale, his father. His blood turned to ice. Rivas smiled at the camera. See, even billionaires need someone to clean their mess. The screen went black. Ethan sat there, shaking. His father hadn't just funded Rivas, he'd negotiated with him. Everything, his company, his name, his legacy was built on the same darkness that destroyed Lila's life. When he finally found her, it was raining again. She was at the old bridge outside town, hood up, bag slung over her shoulder. "Don't run," he said softly. She turned, startled. "How'd you—" "I saw the video." Her eyes closed. "I'm sorry." "You knew?" "I suspected," she whispered. "Your father was one of the names that kept showing up. I didn't tell you because I needed your help, and I was afraid you'd walk away." He laughed bitterly. "You should have trusted me. You should have known your own father." The words stung. Rain poured harder. Thunder rolled. Finally, Ethan said, "Then we finish this together." But she hesitated. "And after?" He looked at her, rain streaking his face, eyes full of something raw and unguarded. "After," he said, "we figure out who we are when we're not running." She almost smiled. Almost. Then headlights flared in the distance. A black SUV screeched to a halt. Men poured out, guns drawn. "Too late," she whispered. He grabbed her hand. "Not yet!" They ran into the storm.
The storm swallowed the sound of their footsteps. Lila and Ethan ran through the woods, branches whipping their faces, flashlights bobbing behind them. "Keep moving," she shouted. A shot cracked, bark exploded beside Ethan's head. He stumbled, pain slicing his shoulder. "Ethan!" "I'm fine, go." But she turned back anyway, firing into the darkness. 2 men went down, a third shouted orders. The SUV's engine revved again, lights cutting through the rain. She dragged Ethan behind a fallen tree, blood soaked through a sleeve. "Hold still. I told you." "Shut up." Her voice shook. She pressed her scarf against the wound, fingers trembling. He managed a weak smile. "You're shaking." "I don't do this anymore. I don't lose people." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You can't save me," he said. "I can try." Then headlights cut across the forest again, closer now. Lila clenched her jaw. "We're out of time." She fired the last of her clip, grabbed him by the collar, and half-dragged, half-carried him down toward the riverbank. Behind them, a voice echoed through the rain. "Lila Monroe, the boss wants a word." Her heart froze. Rivas, he was here. They reached the edge of an old boathouse. Inside, the roof sagged, timbers dripping. She eased Ethan down, gun raised. A slow clap echoed from the doorway. Mateo Rivas stepped inside, gray suit soaked, eyes gleaming with cruelty. "Still the hero, I see." Lila steadied the gun. "Drop the theatrics." He smirked. "You should thank me. I could have killed you years ago." "Should have tried harder." He glanced at Ethan. "And you brought a veil with you. How poetic. The son cleaning up the father's sins." Ethan's head jerked up. "You used my family." "I educated them," Rivas said. "Your father understood that power buys silence. You, on the other hand, think truth buys redemption. It doesn't." He turned the gun toward Ethan. Lila didn't think, she moved. The shot rang out. Her bullet grazed Rivas's arm. His went wild, smashing a lantern. Fire leapt across the floorboards. Rivas laughed. "Still reckless, Monroe." The room erupted in smoke and flames. The heat grew unbearable. Flames roared up the walls, turning the river-damp air into an oven. Ethan struggled to stand. "Go," she yelled. "Not without you." "Ethan." He grabbed her wrist. "We end this together." But Rivas rose from the smoke, gun steady. "You'll both end here." Lila reacted first, lunged, grabbed his arm, twisted. The gun went off again. A deafening crack. Rivas staggered backward, clutching his side. Lila froze. Then another explosion ripped through the rafters. The boathouse began to collapse. She shoved Ethan toward the door. "Move!" He stumbled through the doorway just as a beam came crashing down behind them. Lila turned back. Rivas lay pinned under debris, blood seeping into the wet floor. His eyes found hers one last time. "Even heroes burn," he rasped. She hesitated, then walked away. Outside, the rain hissed against the fire. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching his arm, staring at the burning building. "Is he dead?" she said flatly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The orange glow lit their faces, two survivors illuminated by ruin. Then she whispered, "You should go back. Tell the police it was self-defense. Tell them I forced you." He looked up sharply. "No. They'll never stop if they know I'm alive. Lila, you can't disappear again." She smiled sadly. "It's what I do best." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, into the darkness. "Goodbye, Ethan." He watched as she vanished into the rain, swallowed by night. Morning broke gray and cold. The authorities found the wreckage, the bodies, and a half-burned gun, registered to Lila Monroe. Ethan gave his statement, eyes hollow. He left out one thing, that she was still alive. The headlines read, "Rivas Crime Empire Destroyed in Fire. CEO Ethan Vale Survived Attempted Assassination." He returned to his glass tower in the city, surrounded by silence. Meetings resumed, cameras flashed, but every reflection reminded him of the woman who vanished into smoke. Sometimes late at night he'd hear her voice in the rain. "Don't lose anyone else." He'd whisper back, "Too late." Weeks later, in a border town cafe, Lila sipped black coffee and watched news clips on a dusty TV. Ethan's face filled the screen, giving testimony about corruption inside Vale Industries, promising reform, justice, transparency. Her lips curved faintly. "You did it." She touched the scar on her wrist, the one that burned every time she remembered the fire. A waitress passed by. "Long night?" She smiled faintly. "Long life." Then she dropped a folded note on the counter. "For EV, when you're ready to forgive yourself." She stood, walked out into the sunlight, and disappeared among the crowd. Back in his office, Ethan opened a plain envelope delivered with no return address. Inside was the same note and a photo of Lila laughing, blurry, mid-motion. On the back, 3 words, "Still here, Vale." He closed his eyes and a breath shuddered through him. The pain didn't vanish, but it softened. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle this time. He whispered, "So am I."
The city moved on, as cities do, swallowing tragedy with headlines and morning coffee. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the skyline he once owned. The glass walls reflected back a man he barely recognized, pale, sleepless, haunted. On his desk lay 2 objects, a framed photo of his father and the note from Lila, "When you're ready to forgive yourself." He touched the paper gently, as if afraid it might vanish. Forgive himself. The words echoed like a taunt. He'd testified, exposed the corruption, dismantled what his father built, but none of it brought peace. The media called him brave. Investors called him reckless. But in the quiet, he called himself a coward. Because he hadn't gone after her. He'd let her walk away. Lila sat on a cracked stone bench outside a train station in Lisbon, a faded scarf around her neck, watching people rush past. A new passport, a new name. The same ghosts. She had tried to disappear before, but this time it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exile. She turned her phone over in her hand, thumb hovering over a number she hadn't deleted. Ethan's. She told herself it was impossible, that they came from different worlds. His made of glass towers and headlines, hers made of silence and scars. But still she found herself whispering his name under her breath, like a prayer she didn't believe in anymore. A street musician played a slow, aching tune nearby. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to stop running, to choose something other than survival. The boardroom buzzed with tension. Ethan's advisors droned about strategy, recovery, reputation. He barely heard them. He looked at the men around the table, faces that mirrored the greed he'd once mistaken for ambition. Lila's voice came back to him. You think truth buys redemption. It doesn't. He stood abruptly. Cancel the next quarter's bonuses, he said flatly. Reinvest in the community relief fund, every cent. The room erupted in protest. Ethan didn't care. For the first time, he didn't feel like his father's shadow. Later, alone in the elevator, he whispered to the empty air, You were right, Lila. Redemption isn't bought. It's lived. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the note again. Beneath her handwriting, he scribbled one word. Ready. Night fell over Lisbon. The rain came softly, gentler than the storm she'd left behind. Lila walked along the waterfront, the air thick with sea salt and memory. She stopped when she saw a newsstand. There he was again, Ethan Vale, standing beside the mayor, pledging reforms and rebuilding the burned communities. The headline read, From Scandal to Savior, Ethan Vale's Redemption Drive. She stared at the photo for a long time. His eyes looked different, steadier, older. Maybe he had changed. She folded the paper under her arm and kept walking, heart pounding with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That night, in a dim hostel room, she picked up the phone and finally called. It rang once, twice. Then a voice, familiar, careful, answered. Vale Industries? Her breath caught. She almost hung up. Then she heard his voice, quiet but unmistakable. Lila? Silence. She didn't know how he knew. It was as if he'd been waiting for this call every day. I shouldn't have called, she said finally. I was hoping you would. Her throat tightened. You're still terrible at staying alive. He laughed softly, the sound cracking. You're still terrible at saying goodbye. For a long while, neither spoke, just the sound of rain and breathing. Then Ethan said, There's a flight to Lisbon in the morning. Lila closed her eyes. Don't. I have to, he said. You once told me not to lose anyone else. I didn't listen. Ethan. Lila, please. The line went quiet. Then softly she whispered, You won't find the same woman. Good, he said. I wasn't looking for her. I was looking for you. Morning sun crept across the airport runway. Lila waited, nerves hidden behind her sunglasses. Every instinct told her to leave before he arrived, to stay invisible, stay safe. But when she saw him step off the plane, something in her broke. He looked exhausted, but real. No security detail, no arrogance, just a man who had finally chosen something other than power. They stopped a few feet apart. Neither spoke. Then Ethan said quietly, "You once saved my life. Let me return the favor." She frowned. "I don't need saving." "I know. But maybe we both need forgiving." Her defenses wavered. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't have come." He smiled faintly. "I'm probably right, but I did." They walked along the same waterfront she'd wandered the night before, the sea glittering under a gray sky. She stopped. She said, "This doesn't fix everything." "I don't want to fix it. I just don't want to forget it." Lila stopped, staring at him. For the first time in years, she saw no expectation in a man's eyes, only acceptance. She took a shaky breath. "I'm tired of running." "Then don't," he said simply. The wind tugged at her hair. She looked away, then back at him, tears blurring the horizon. "I don't know how to stop." He stepped closer. "Then let me stay until you do." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. Fingers touched. The world gone still. No promises, no guarantees. Just a choice. Later that evening, they sat together on a quiet rooftop cafe, the rain returning like an old friend. Ethan glanced at her. "You left me a note once," he said. "It said, 'When you're ready to forgive yourself.'" She smiled faintly. "You wrote back." "I did. What did you write?" He leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Ready." Lila laughed softly, tears mixing with rain. "Then maybe I am too." They sat there as the city lights shimmered below, two souls bound not by rescue, but by choice, choosing to begin again.
6 months later, the restaurant had been rebuilt. New lights, new glass, but the same name above the door, Maison de Lune. Ethan stood at the entrance, adjusting his tie, feeling strangely nervous. The last time he'd been here, blood had stained the floor and bullets had shattered the chandeliers. Tonight, there was music, a soft piano melody threading through the air. The hostess smiled as she led him inside. The dining room glowed in gold and amber hues, couples laughing quietly, glasses clinking. Everything was calm. He paused at the same table where it all began, and there she was. Leela sat in the corner, hair shorter now, smile quieter, eyes brighter. She looked up before he could speak, as if she'd known he'd come. "You're late," she said softly. He smiled. "Traffic." 6 months of it? He chuckled, sitting across from her. "You disappeared again." She tilted her head. "I needed to see if you'd come looking." "I always do." For a moment, they just looked at each other, two people who'd been through fire and come out scarred, but still standing. The waiter brought wine. Neither of them touched it at first. The silence wasn't awkward now. It was full, alive. Leela leaned forward, tracing the rim of her glass. "I heard you dissolved Vale Industries." "I did," he said. "Turned it into a foundation. Clean energy, education, outreach. I figured it was time to stop building towers and start building something that lasts." She smiled faintly. "Your father would have hated that." "Exactly." They both laughed quietly. Then she said, "And you, still saving the world one scar at a time?" She shrugged. "I consult, security contract sometimes. Mostly I travel." "Running?" "Not anymore," she said, looking out the window. "Just moving." Her tone softened. "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day." he said. "Not the bullets, not the fire. You." She exhaled slowly. "You're a terrible liar." "I'm getting better at the truth." The pianists shifted to a familiar tune, something slow, hauntingly beautiful. Ethan's gaze drifted to the mirror behind the bar. Their reflections sat side by side, perfectly still. "Strange," Leela murmured, "how we end up back where it started." "Not quite the same," he said. "No," she agreed. "We're not hiding anymore." She looked down, voice trembling just slightly. "Do you ever wonder if we were meant to meet that night or if it was just chaos doing what chaos does?" Ethan thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe both. Maybe the universe breaks us so we can rebuild something real." Her eyes glistened. "And what are we rebuilding?" He smiled gently. "Whatever comes next." After dinner, they walked outside. The city buzzed with evening light, car horns, laughter, rain beginning to fall again, soft and familiar. Ethan opened an umbrella, holding it out over both of them. "You know," he said quietly, "there's a new outreach center opening tomorrow, Riverfront District. We could use someone who knows how to stay alive under pressure." Leela raised her eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job or a life?" He met her eyes. "Both." She laughed softly. "You still think too big." He shrugged. "You still run too far." For a long moment they just stood there, two silhouettes under the rain, framed by city light and memory. Then she said, "Maybe it's time I stopped." They walked toward the car, rain falling harder now. Leela paused, looking back at the restaurant, the place where everything changed. "Funny," she said. "Last time I walked out of here, I thought I was done with saving people." Ethan smiled. "Maybe you were. Maybe now you just save yourself." She looked at him, something tender and unspoken passing between them. "Do you really think we get second chances?" He nodded slowly. "Only if we're brave enough to take them." She hesitated, then took his hand. As they reached the car, thunder rolled again, distant and low. Ethan opened the door for her. She stopped, glanced at him, and said softly, "You remember what you said that night?" He frowned. "Which part?" "In the middle of all that chaos, you said, 'Don't lose anyone else.'" He nodded. "I remember." She stepped closer, rain streaking down her face. "Then don't lose me." He reached up, brushed the wet hair from her eyes and whispered, "Never again." The city lights reflected off the wet pavement as they drove away, two ghosts reborn into something human again. In the rearview mirror, the restaurant faded into the distance, its sign glowing softly in the rain. A newspaper headline caught the morning sun in a cafe window. Former CEO Ethan Vale and security expert Leela Monroe launch global initiative for crisis rehabilitation. Below the headline was a photo. The two of them, laughing, sleeves rolled up, helping rebuild a flood shelter. Somewhere in the background, a waitress turned the page, smiling to herself. "Finally," she murmured, "a happy ending." Leela and Ethan stand together at a new training facility overlooking the ocean, not as fugitives, not as survivors, but as partners. The wind moves through her hair, the light glints off the waves. Ethan says quietly, "So, what now?" Leela smiles. "Now, we live." The camera pans upward, the sea stretching endlessly, sunlight breaking through the clouds, as the last echo of the storm fades into calm.
A year later, the world had changed again, slower, gentler, quieter. The coastal air tasted of salt and peace. In a small glass-walled office overlooking the water, Ethan sat at his desk, reading the letter that had arrived that morning. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Leela's. "Ethan, I took the early flight to Geneva. The UN summit begins tomorrow. You are right. People listen when truth comes from those who have scars to show for it. I keep thinking about that night. How 5 men tried to destroy what they didn't understand. Maybe that's what fear does. It makes us break what reminds us of our own weakness. But fear isn't what defines us anymore. We built something from that chaos, something that breathes. You gave me back my name, my purpose, and maybe my peace. If I don't see you before you arrive, meet me at the old cafe by the river. The one with the broken clock. You'll know why when you get there. Ethan folded the letter carefully, slipping it into his pocket. The broken clock. The cafe where he'd first hidden after the attack, when he thought she hadn't survived. He smiled faintly. Of course. The drive along the coast was silent, except for the sound of the sea. He passed rebuilt villages, community centers, children waving from schoolyards. Fragments of what they'd built together through the foundation. Everywhere he looked, there was motion, life. No more skyscrapers, no more boardrooms, just humanity finding its rhythm again. As he approached the river, the afternoon sun dipped low, painting the world in amber. The cafe still leaned slightly to one side, its wooden sign cracked, the clock above the door forever frozen at 9:14. The time the attack had begun. She was there. Sitting at a corner table, coffee steaming beside an open folder. The sunlight cut through the window, haloing her in gold. Leela looked up as he entered. Her smile small but certain. You're late, she said again, the same words she'd spoken months ago, but this time they sounded like home. He laughed. You're predictable. Never, she said. Standing. He moved toward her, and for a moment they simply stood there. Saying nothing. No need for explanations anymore. The silence was peace. They sat. Coffee between them. I almost didn't come, she said, as he admitted. I knew you would, she said softly. Still reading minds? Just yours. He looked around, the clock, the light, the calm river outside. You said I'd know why when I got here. She nodded toward the clock. Because it's broken, but it still matters. That's what we are. Time stopped for us that night, but everything since then. It's been borrowed time. We got to choose what to do with it. He was quiet. And what do we do now? She smiled. We stop surviving. We start living. He took her hand. Together? Always. They walked outside, leaving 2 empty coffee cups steaming in the cool air. By the riverbank, she looked down at the water, calm, endless. You know, she said, for years I thought survival was about staying alive, but I think it's about finding something worth staying alive for. Ethan nodded. And you found it. She turned to him. We both did. The wind caught her hair, sunlight reflecting in her eyes. He thought all this time he'd seen everyone as victims or survivors, but that wasn't the truth. It wasn't about the attack or revenge or guilt. It was about learning to trust again. Ourselves, each other, the world. He smiled. Maybe even love. She looked up teasingly. Don't ruin my philosophy with sentiment. He grinned. Too late. A group of children ran by, their laughter echoing along the river. One of them stopped and waved at Leela, a girl wearing a blue foundation t-shirt with the words, "Rebuild the Light," printed across the back. Lyra waved back. She said softly, Ethan watched them go. They're the reason it mattered. She looked at him. Do you ever wonder what people will say about us one day? He chuckled. Probably that we were insane. She shook her head. Maybe they'll say we didn't let fear win. He nodded slowly. That's enough. As the sun sank into the horizon, they walked along the riverbank in silence. No plans, no running, just 2 people who had learned to be still. The sound of the river blended with the soft hum of the city in the distance. Leela looked ahead, her hand brushing his. You know, she said, you ever think about how far we've come? He smiled. Every day. They stopped at the edge of the bridge. The wind moved gently through her hair. Ethan looked out over the water and said quietly, When it started, I thought that night would destroy me. She turned to him. It didn't. It made you human.